Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to each and every one of you. I am Sarina Chugani Molina, Associate Dean and Associate Professor in the School of Leadership and Education Sciences, or SOLS as we fondly call it, here at the University of San Diego. I am excited to have this opportunity to welcome you to our annual State of Nonprofits and Philanthropy Summit. We begin today's program in honor of Indigenous peoples. As a daughter of refugees, having never set foot on my ancestral lands, but having traversed many lands as part of our diasporic movement, I humbly and with deep gratitude honor the histories and wisdoms of the people upon the lands upon which we reside. I tread these lands with great care, with the intention to reduce harm and to be of service with the privileges afforded to me. We acknowledge that the land upon which the University of San Diego resides is the traditional and unceded territory of the Kumeyaay Nation. The spiritual traditions and enduring sovereignty of the Kumeyaay are the first that we acknowledge from this land. From there, we combine our Catholic foundations with respect for free inquiry and pursuit of truth as we foster a world of peace and justice. At SOLS, we are honored to be home to the Nonprofit Institute as part of our larger mission as a school to develop leaders in counseling, teaching, nonprofits, and other fields to promote a more inclusive, just, and equitable society and work in service of our communities, both locally and globally. As we reflect upon the difficulties of the past few years, our university remains steadfast in our focus on engaging our faculty, staff, and students in service of the betterment of our communities. While we all feel uncertainty about the future, we must continually remind ourselves that it is our responsibility to promote civil dialogue and a sense of solidarity, that we are all in this together. In SOLS and across the university, our mission is to educate the whole person, which includes opening minds and hearts to not only the beauty, but also the harsh realities of the world. We are keenly focused on preparing individuals to be ethical leaders and compassionate citizens who are empowered to confront humanity's most urgent challenges. In my recent speaking engagement in southern India this summer, I saw the powerful ways in which nonprofits coalesced around providing free education, free medical care, and free nutrition to children from rural countries, both within India and internationally. Most recently, they established a free medical school in hopes that these doctors will use this gift to serve their own communities. This work, as we know, is more important today than ever before. At SOLS, we recognize the importance of convening our nonprofit community to engage in deep discussions and reflections around the latest research and opportunities to reimagine what this research means for your work together as you chart a course for a better future. We hope this summit helps you feel a stronger sense of connection with our colleagues and your colleagues in the work that is required of all of us as we work towards a more peaceful and just world. And now, I'd like to turn the stage over to Stephen Chin.
Well, good morning, and let's make sure that we give a warm welcome to Dr. Molina for getting us started this morning. Thank you. Well, happy Friday, everybody. It's great to see everybody in person once again. I have to tell you, Emily warned me that I would not be nervous. And as I look out at the room, I say, where's my third cup of coffee? But in any case, my name is Stephen Chin, and in real life, I have the privilege of serving as the manager of account management and community relations at Sharp Health Plan. And in my happy dream state, I have the privilege of serving as the chair of the advisory board for the Nonprofit Institute. And it's an honor to serve the university. I can't say enough about the gratitude that I receive every day working with Emily Young, as well as her talented staff and the team at the advisory board, who are all very talented leaders and nonprofit professionals. On behalf of the Nonprofit Institute and our advisory board, I want to say welcome to the 10th Annual State of Nonprofits, and thank you so much for being here today. So the Nonprofit Institute is dedicated to supporting and strengthening leaders and organizations committed to making the world a better place. And throughout the year, we provide critical resources such as research, education, training, consulting, and coaching to enhance nonprofit efforts within our communities. I'm especially thrilled to be with you this year as the Nonprofit Institute celebrates its 20th anniversary. Let's give a warm round of applause for that. So today we're going to delve into the latest findings from the annual State of Nonprofits and Philanthropy report for the San Diego region. Our common goal of creating a better community is born out of first listening and understanding. This report is one of the ways that we can continue those important conversations within a common language. Thank you to all of you who have provided your input to the annual surveys. Your participation is critical to understanding what is happening in the nonprofit sector now and to assess what we need to prioritize moving forward. So this collective data generates valuable insights in the key issues and trends. Now, we're here for the State of Nonprofits, but Nonprofit Institute hosts programs and convenings throughout the year. So in addition to today's event, I wanted to remind all of you about some of the upcoming events. So next month, we have a two-part webinar series with our very own Pat Libby on nonprofit advocacy and lobbying. In December, there's a networking meeting of our San Diego Regional Climate Collaborative. And in January, the Nonprofit Institute will host its signature event, the Nonprofit Governance Symposium. So we hope that you'll make time for at least some of those events coming up. I've already mentioned Emily and the Nonprofit Institute team, as well as our advisory board, and all of you, of course, but we must also acknowledge the invaluable support of our sponsors and our funders who made today possible. So I'm just going to read some of these sponsors that are on the screen for you. KidSpark Education, the Legler Benbow Foundation, Union Bank, the Westreich Foundation, Data Lake Nonprofit Research, Luth Research, Nonprofit Solutions, Sempra Energy, California Bank and Trust, San Diego Business Journal, San Diego Magazine, San Diego Union Tribune, the Printers Circle, Alliance Healthcare Foundation, Cal Nonprofits Insurance Services, Dowling and Yankee Wealth Advisors, For Purpose Law Group, Qualcomm, Rancho Santa Fe Foundation, San Diego Workforce Partnership, Sharp Health Plan, Tavella Dowling Attorneys at Law. In addition, there are several other generous supporters who are listed on the screen. Let's all give them a warm round of applause. Now, before we dive into the report, I have a very special acknowledgement to share to begin our day. It's truly an honor to present this year's Libby Award for Excellence in Nonprofit Leadership. We established this award in honor of our visionary founder, Pat Libby. Now, I first met Pat when my Maria decided that she needed to go back to school. And I distinctly remember attending a picnic for the new class. I believe Maria may have been one of the first cohorts. Anyway, when we were introduced, Pat smiled, in that very Pat smile, and she gave me that look and a wink and her own distinct sense of humor, and she said, "Nice to meet you, Stephen." Now, I might suggest that you say goodbye to Maria for the next 2 years. Of course, the next 2 years turned out to be a joy for Maria, and also the work intrigued me. It's one of the reasons why I have continued to serve our community and do so through the Nonprofit Institute. Pat's ongoing work with nonprofits has been guided by her Jewish faith, particularly by the values of tzedakah and talunakam. These, excuse my pronunciations, these are Hebrew phrases that respectively mean righteousness and repairing the world. The Libby Award recognizes an exemplary nonprofit leader who is putting these values into practice. So this year, We are very proud to present the Libby Award to Jason Paggio, who is the President and CEO of the Asian Business Association. Now, before I bring Jason up here, I want to tell you a little bit about how he has ignited an exciting and passionate fire within our community that speaks to the values of the Libby Award. The Asian Business Association of San Diego is a 501c3 charity serving the San Diego region since 1990. And Jason was selected as the executive director for ABA not too long ago. In the brief time since then, however, Jason has grown ABA to its largest size since inception, and he has expanded ABA's impact through community-based outreach and partnerships. Jason and his team have worked tirelessly to assist thousands of local businesses in gaining access to grant relief, enabling them to stay in business. Jason and ABA have also built community awareness and support for our API-owned businesses and nonprofits, releasing a landmark study that found they generated $5 billion in economic impact for our region. All of this in spite of a global pandemic and xenophobic attacks. Just this last year, with Jason's visionary leadership, ABA worked with local leaders to formally designate the Convoy District in Kearny Mesa as the Pan-Asian Cultural and Business Innovation District. Jason also developed the first of its kind collaborative among the 3 largest ethnic chambers for our region: the San Diego County Hispanic Chamber, the San Diego Black Chamber, and the ABA of San Diego. Collectively, these chambers can now support minority-owned small businesses even more effectively. And just this year, Governor Newsom appointed Jason to the California Commission on Asian and Pacific Islander American Affairs, and locally, Jason serves on Mayor Gloria's Asian Pacific Islander Advisory Group, as well as several other civic and nonprofit boards. Jason truly embodies the spirit of Pat's work and her pursuit of righteousness and repairing the world. We are honored to present Jason Paggio with this year's Libby Award for Excellence in Nonprofit Leadership. Congratulations, Jason. Come on up.
Well, thank you so much, Stephen, Emily, and Pat, for your leadership and your vision with this. I don't have a speech prepared, but I do have about 10 minutes that I'd like to talk. No, I'm just kidding. So it's really nice to be here. I'm actually a student. Some of you know I'm pursuing my part-time MBA here at the Canals School of Business. And so it's really nice to be here, and I would imagine I don't know if I'm going to pass all my classes, but I know at least I have an A here at the Nonprofit Institute. I'd argue it's an easy A, but it's definitely not an easy A here. So I'm so appreciative of that. And for the Nonprofit Institute, the work that makes my job and our organization's job easier, trying to maximize our collective impact. Having this, our region is so lucky to have NPI here and being able to help us understand the philanthropic side of things, avoiding duplication, as Stephen mentioned, with the alliance we have with the Black and Hispanic chambers, and just being able to be better at the work that we do, working with more folks. So, of course, couldn't do that without an incredibly supportive board of directors. I throw the most audacious dreams and goals at them, and they are so supportive in every single way, and that's able to help us do that work day in and day out. And our team, a lot of our team are here today. They're the ones who do the work every single day. They're the ones who teach me more and how we can collaborate more. Wesley, Yvonne, Jessica, Van, Alex, Lauren, all of them. I mean, we started out with a team of 2 people, and our team in total is probably closer to 20 now over the course of the pandemic. But I will leave you with one quote that my team instilled in me. It was during one of our Lunar New Year celebrations. And we adopted it. It was a proverb, and that proverb is, if you always give, you'll always have, and that's how we operate every single day for the work that we do. So thank you for this. Probably the best thing I'm ever going to receive in my lifetime, so I'm going to retire after this. So thank you so much for this, Steve and Emily and Pat, for your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's get a picture in the park. Give us just 1 minute. We're going to get a picture here. yeah.
I don't know, Steve, but I think it's being honest. This is like my Queen Elizabeth moment.
All right, let's give it up for Jason and Pat. Thank you. Well, now that the excitement is over, we get to talk data. But seriously, in addition to the Libby Award, we have an action-packed morning planned for you. We'll first listen to an overview of key findings from the survey. Then we will take a brief break before our keynote conversation featuring the Conrad Previs Foundation CEO, Grant Oliphant, as well as our president of USD, Jim Harris. And afterwards, we'll hear stories of innovation and success from some of our colleagues in the nonprofit community. And finally, we'll wrap up and break for lunch. We hope you'll find opportunities throughout the day, most especially, of course, during the break and the lunch and maybe afterwards to reconnect with each other. And I would also suggest to maybe reflect upon the findings from this survey and discuss some of the relevance or not of some of what you hear today. Just wanted to do a final reminder that as you listen to the highlights of the survey, we encourage you to share what inspires you and what you're learning throughout the day by joining the conversation online. You'll find more information about how to join the conversation on the screen. And now that my duties are concluded, it is my distinct pleasure to bring our survey stars to the stage. So please welcome Dr. Laura Dietrich, Tom Abruzzo, and Nayala Manriquez. Thank you again.
It's all going to be relevant, Stephen. We're not have to worry about that. So Tom and Nayeli will join us in just a little bit. Good morning, everybody. How are you all today? Good, okay. Thank you all for gathering here with us at USD to shine a light on what I think is your often overlooked but completely valid and important work that you do for us in our nonprofit sector. So it's so nice to see all of you, many old friends here in person. It's a little moving, actually. I'm feeling a little moved. So I thought maybe we'd just take a second to acknowledge how fortunate we all are to be here in community with one another. It's been a long time since we've been in this room together, and some of our friends aren't here with us. So I thought maybe we'd just take a second to think about that. Maybe give a smile or a nod to the person next to you. There's somebody actually next to you. Don't touch them or kiss them, okay? Please. Whatever you do, that would be violating all kinds of USD COVID protocols. So let's start off with a quick poll. How many Toreros do we have in the house this morning? Raise your hands. Woo-hoo. Well, welcome, because it is homecoming week, so you are home, and to all of you, I'm glad to celebrate that time with you, and maybe we'll see you on Saturday as well. And I want to say welcome to all of you. As I always say, and many of you have heard me say this before, anyone who cares about nonprofits or our community, this is your academic home. USD and Souls, where we do and care about all things nonprofit. This is your home, and you are always welcome here in any way, shape, or form. So Torero or not, Souls and USD are really here for our community, our nonprofit community, and we really thank you for connecting our students and our research teams and our faculty with your nonprofits. You let us into your communities and you trust us, and we appreciate that. If you'd like to learn more about what we do here formally in terms of academic programs, you can visit with we have a wonderful master's program. Somebody already talked about that. We have PhD programs and different things. You're welcome to talk to any of our ambassadors that are out in the hallway, or anyone with one of these silver badges on. Even our president will be here, if he's not already here already. You can ask him, anybody, about the work that we're doing here. We'd love to connect. So today we're going to present the full findings of the 2022 State of Nonprofits and Philanthropy report. And this report integrates a lot of data. That's why we get a break after this, okay? Some data come from an annual survey that we do with all of our nonprofit leaders, many of whom are in this room who respond, so thank you for that. We also poll San Diegans quarterly. We do a public opinion polling. We gather data from the IRS and the EDD and from other sources, and we also actually are incorporating some data from some research projects that we did with the San Diego Foundation and the Conrad Prebys Foundation, and they've allowed us to share what we learned through those processes that'll be integrated into our work today. So for those of you that didn't catch it in the first go-around, we are celebrating and have been here studying nonprofits and teaching about nonprofits for 20 years. I did not have gray hair then, and I did not wear glasses in my first presentation. That's okay. And some of you, I saw a graying Enrico Arnulfo in the audience here. Some of us are graying together. So although it may make us feel, I called you out. You're CEO, you can take it. You look good with that gray hair. It's kind of like this. Although it makes some of us maybe feel a little old, looking back over the body of knowledge that we've accumulated in this time, right? Knowledge we have created together, all of us, over that period of time, and just luckily, kind of coordinated it through the Nonprofit Institute. It creates a perspective and gives way to what I kind of think of as like, I'm kind of having this dawning realization, right? That what in the moment felt like sort of these things that were never gonna change and never get better about working, and dealing with nonprofit life. Some of those frustrating truths, if you will, they're actually starting to change when now I can actually look back and talk about and see these things, and I hope some of you can too, and I think that's really exciting, right? So physicist and philosopher, don't worry, I'll never talk about physics except for this one time. Thomas Kuhn calls this a paradigm shift, right? So when a paradigm shifts, we experience a revolutionary and dramatic change in our assumptions. And I think that's what's happening on many levels in the nonprofit sector. So paradigms can shift really slowly over eons, right? Or overnight, like in a jolt. Like, can I say COVID-19 pandemic or something like that? I kind of think the Padres being in the playoffs is sort of a paradigm shift as well, but a good one. I'm happy about that. So I do look forward, in all seriousness, to hearing what you think about my ideas and my thoughts on that topic. So let's get to work here this morning. This year we find San Diego nonprofits well-positioned. So we could when we pull all this data and look at it, we can take a lot of different vantage points. And I'm gonna just kind of put a stake in the ground to say I think that nonprofits are really well-positioned right now to meet the challenging needs of our community. We may agree or disagree, but these findings are evidenced by a whole host of things. Unprecedented levels of cash reserves and a good financial position, the likes of which I've never seen in my 2 decades of doing this work, right? For whatever reason, nonprofits have, and there's a whole host of reasons we'll talk about later, but you're positioned pretty well, and you may not feel it personally, but as a sector as a whole, doing pretty well with reserves. Effective collaboration strategies. We're seeing more what I'm kind of fondly calling new school collaboration, where people actually collaborate and work together in really meaningful ways, built on more trusting relationships that I think have especially developed between community-based organizations and larger organizations and government and philanthropy during the pandemic especially. We're seeing more productive dialogue on social justice and diversity, equity, inclusion issues, and other kinds of things like climate change that are taking place. And we're talking about that more with our foundation and government partners as well. We have a growing philanthropy sector, something we haven't had in a long time, focused on San Diego, and there has been an increase in efficient and trust-based philanthropy practices. So this is all good news, right? And furthermore, there have been significant allocations in the latest state budget and in federal legislation that really take into account nonprofit work in different ways, and we hope you can take advantage of those. So I'm supposed to be clicking, I think. See, the other part is, there you go. Surprise, there you go. Very good. Yeah, it's too long. Grant will show you later his very parsimonious slides. So our findings are bolstered by public opinion too. As you know, we track public confidence in the nonprofit sector, and public confidence remains strong and has over the last 10 years that we've studied it. People just trust nonprofits more than they do corporations and government to do a host of things. And you can see kind of act on the public's behalf, provide quality services, act ethically. The number, that 80% and above, holds pretty steady for nonprofits, but over time, we've seen a lot more fluctuation, depending on how people feel about government, especially. The number goes up or down, or down and down, or whatever. Whatever's going on. So, the other thing that's, I think, encouraging, that makes me feel good about things, is San Diegans actually believe they can make a difference. So when we polled, we asked a new polling question which said, do you think you can make a difference in your community by donating or volunteering to a nonprofit? And we see that 2/3 do. 21% are unsure, so that's our next task, right, to bring those folks in and show them how. And I don't know what to do with those who disagree, but we'll leave them behind. But we have momentum on our side, and people believe, and I think that's the most important thing. So we have some issues. So this against this good position, right? The sector's ability to realize its full potential is, I think, threatened by a couple of things that we need to attend to. It's most threatened by impacts of inflation and competition for qualified workers, okay? And I'm not telling you all anything you don't already know. In the nonprofit sector, inflation is like a quadruple whammy, okay? It increases the cost of delivering services, puts upward pressure on wages in an already tight labor market. It erodes, I'm actually afraid that the gains that I've seen a lot of nonprofits make towards equitable wages are going to have already been eroded by the cost, by the rate of inflation. So it erodes the value of your assets, and as well as the assets of folks that might want to give you money. So we have to figure out how to address this issue with donors and other folks, so that we can keep up, just like everybody else is trying to do. And as more people fall into need because of inflation, I mean, I saw a $7 gas price yesterday. That'll just drive up the need for services. So we're working on that, okay? At the same time, San Diegans are growing increasingly concerned over a host of issues, including that impact our quality of life, including housing, climate change, wildfires, and jobs that provide a livable wage. However, our polling also shows us that individuals don't seem to realize that the issues over which they express the most alarm are the ones in large part where you're on the front lines leading, where the nonprofit sector is front and center. So then, of course, actually in the real report, which you will get a copy of and is also available online, there's about like 20 more things they're concerned about that goes in between here and here. And then the very last thing is the economic health of San Diego's nonprofits and charities. Okay, so at the very, very bottom, so for me, there's this like feeling that there's simply this presumption that we will just all figure it out and we'll be there to serve and to help no matter what. So to effectively really address these concerns, the sector does need to grow. Yet 2/3 of our nonprofit leaders tell us they're having a hard time hiring people. Okay, just like many other sectors. I mean, you cannot compete against the starting wages at McDonald's or Costco or Walmart right now, and the benefits that they're offering. That's causing a whole host of problems. So until individuals really can make the connection between the health and capacity of the nonprofit sector and their own quality of life, the true power of what we can achieve together as a community may not really be fully known. And then we yearn for some leadership around here, okay? So you guys some of you have seen this slide before. We ask, in our nonprofit leaders survey, we ask nonprofits leaders to rank and grade the leadership of certain sectors. Well, okay, there is an omission on this slide. So they rank themselves. You all rank yourselves too, and you rank yourselves as a C-. But not surprisingly, nonprofit leaders rank themselves the highest, but it's still not, in graduate school, we consider C and below failing, so it's all failing grades. But what's really interesting about this is we kind of all sort of see leadership as somebody else's job. And we all pretty sure that somebody else isn't doing a very good job of it. So we're really trying to think at the Nonprofit Institute about how we develop sort of leadership where we all realize our own role in that space. So, so that's kind of the backdrop against which I'm going to have my colleagues come and share with you the nitty-gritty findings that go behind those sort of collective findings. And I have the distinct privilege to introduce you to two really vital members of our research team who are going to walk you through that data. First, I'd like to introduce Nayeli Manriquez. Ask her to join me on stage, Nayeli. Nayeli is a fourth-year PhD student as well as a research assistant at the Nonprofit Institute, and her research is grounded in centering historically marginalized voices using the social change model of leadership as it applies to civil society, and she's getting ready to write an awesome dissertation on that topic. And now I'd also like to ask Tom Abruzzo to join me here as well. Tom is also a fourth-year PhD student and a research assistant at MPI, and his dissertation is focused on inclusive leadership as both theory and practice, particularly in the nonprofit performing arts. So although you may not know Tom and Nayeli, it is vitally important for me and our team to put them in front of you because there's so much work going on here that you probably don't even know about. And they know you because they crunch and squash and squeeze all of the data that you send us. And Tom works primarily with the numbers, and Nayeli works primarily with the words. It's kind of the song behind the numbers that makes it all come together. And so we thought it was a particularly appropriate combination to have them come and walk through findings. I'm sure they're probably not feeling like it was such a great idea right now, but I turn it over to you, Tom, and there you go. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? No. How about now?
Is it on?
How about? Oh, how about now? Now? Yeah. All right. Fifth time's the charm. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, round of applause to Dr. Dietrich for that intro. She's warming us up. We're excited to center your voices as leaders of the community and helping us paint a picture of what nonprofit and philanthropic centers look like. This summit would not at all be possible without the time you've taken to complete our survey year after year. So thank you so much. A round of applause to all of you. I can definitely say Tom and I have enjoyed nerding out on data most of the time. Right, Tom?
Right, yeah. 75% of the time.
And with that, I turn it over to my partner in crime for the past 4 years to get this data party started.
Yes, data party. Okay. Yes, this is when you're going to hear words like average and percent. When I say data, you say party. Data. Data. Okay. All right. So we're going to start off by framing this report for you by taking a look at a snapshot of both the for-profit and, both the nonprofit and philanthropic sectors. And we're going to start with the nonprofit sector. So these are IRS data points for the most recent year available, which is 2020. And there were 12,458 nonprofits, which is a 22% increase in the number of nonprofits since 2014. And since we've been tracking the nonprofit sector in the county, we've not only seen a growth in the number of nonprofits, but also in the assets, revenues, and expenses, which are represented by the yellow, green, and gray lines. But as you can see, it appears that we are starting to see this leveling off of growth, right? And so as these lines indicate, revenue, assets, and expenses have either stayed the same or grew very little since 2018. And given the economic volatility over the past 2 years, it's going to be really important to track this financial picture of the sector as the 2021 and 2022 data become available. So if we take a deeper dive into revenue growth specifically, we can see that some organizations are growing more than others. So this chart shows the 5-year growth rate by organizational budget size. And so for organizations with budgets under $1 million, illustrated in yellow, there's been a decrease in revenue over the past 5 years. And whereas in organizations with budgets over $1 million, which is represented by green, there's been a growth in revenue. And you can see that the largest concentration of growth is within organizations with budget sizes over $10 million. So, where do San Diego nonprofits get their revenue? As shown in this chart, this is for 2020, nonprofits get their revenue primarily from three sources. The largest is fee-for-service revenue, represented by the green bar, followed by government grants, represented by light gray, and then individual donations and grants from foundations and corporations, represented by dark blue. And interestingly enough, although not shown in this graph, government grants and individual donations and foundation and corporate grants were slightly larger in 2020 than in previous years. And this is likely due to emergency relief funding such as PPP and increased funding from foundations. So as we just saw, individual donations make up a good part of a nonprofit's revenue. And for this reason, we also ask San Diegans in our quarterly poll about their giving patterns. So in this graph, we begin with Q1 in 2017, and we track through Q2 of 2022. And you can see that while there is some fluctuation from quarter to quarter, the number of households that donate to local nonprofits has remained relatively steady for many years. And again, although not visible in this chart, the average size of donation amounts has increased in recent years. So in the second quarter of 2022, we also asked San Diegans which causes they donated to. And interestingly, the causes people donated to did not seem to align with their greatest issues of concern. You'll recall from a few minutes ago, Dr. Dietrich said that climate change and housing ranked highest on San Diegans' issues of concern. But as shown here, only 16% and 14% of residents in our sample reported donating to the environment and housing or shelter. Residents most frequently reported donating to animal-related causes, and some San Diegans even reported that they were changing the causes that they were giving to, and you can see that highlighted on your right. So causes like the war in Ukraine, women's rights, local community needs, and people who are unsheltered.
Now we will take a look at a different part of the nonprofit sector, the philanthropic sector. San Diego County has historically had a small philanthropic footprint compared to LA and the Bay Area, although the sector's growing, which I will tell you more about in a minute. Based on 990 data filed in 2019, there are a total of 951 foundations in the county. You can see in this table that independent and family foundations make up the largest share of foundations in terms of the number in the region and assets, making up 72% of all assets. There are very few community foundations, only 27, right up there, but they make up 22% of foundation assets. Now we're going to switch off and tell you a little bit, share a little bit more about our independent and family foundations. You can see here in this graph that in terms of assets, they have been steadily increasing and are expected to grow even more with the launch of the Conrad Previs Foundation. The Conrad Previs Foundation started grant making in 2020, but their true impact will probably not be visible until we see 2021 and 2022 data. The Conrad Previs Foundation is the first foundation in the county with over $1 billion in discretionary assets. This will bring an estimated 16% increase in total foundation assets and a 22% increase in total independent and family foundation assets. Like many nonprofits, funders have adapted and changed over the last few years to respond more quickly and efficiently to meet emergent needs. In the last year's survey in 2021, we asked our nonprofit leaders which practices they most hoped funders would continue in the future. The top 3 most hoped for practices were multi-year support, unrestricted funding, and funding for capacity building. In this year's survey, we took that same list and asked nonprofit which practices they're actually seeing funders make. You can see here that there is evidence that many of the practices nonprofits hope to see were actually practices funders engaged in this year. The top practices funders responded funders reported observing from funders were prioritizing nonprofits that serve Black, Indigenous, and people of color, or BIPOC, providing unrestricted funding, and communicating more regularly about decision making. Nonprofits would like to see more multi-year support than they are currently seeing. There has been a movement in recent years for funders to engage in an approach called trust-based philanthropy. Trust-based philanthropy is an approach to grant making that values relationship building with grantees, shifts power imbalances, and works to advance equity. Guided by this model, the San Diego Foundation drew from practices of trust-based philanthropy to inform their grant-making strategy for their COVID-19 Community Response Fund. We were fortunate that the San Diego Foundation commissioned us to conduct a study to better understand how funders can build trust with nonprofits. Through focus groups and surveys with grantees that received COVID-19 community response funding, we found that foundations can build trust through flexible funding, two-way communication between grantees and funders, simplification of reporting, and offering transparency and feedback. Grantees also provided suggestions on how funders can focus on equity in their grant making, which included soliciting nonprofit feedback, ensuring stakeholders have a seat at the table, making the application process and reporting a little bit more simpler, making it easier to get in touch with an actual person, hiring a diverse staff to make funding decisions, and investing in a diversity of groups. For the past 6 years, we have been collecting data in our nonprofit leader survey on how nonprofits are addressing issues like diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as climate change. We have found evidence that there have been small incremental gains over the 6-year time period. Since 2017, there has been an increase in the percentage of respondents who are satisfied with their organization's willingness to discuss concepts of DEI and their organization's ability to implement DEI practices. We have found that there's a positive relationship between these two, meaning that organizations that are willing to talk about DEI are also more likely to implement practices of DEI. We asked nonprofits about the practices that they have implemented to address diversity, equity, and inclusion within their organizations. The green bar indicates where practices have been implemented, while the white bar indicates where practices are planned but not yet implemented. Nonprofits most frequently reported implementing practices to increase the diversity of their staff and board. Roughly 2/3 of respondents also reported integrating equity into their program delivery approach and seeking community input to understand needs. Many organizations also reported providing training to staff and to a lesser extent to boards on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Considering boards are responsible for instituting policy, it is important that boards also receive capacity building in addressing DEI in the same degree as staff. Although many organizations have implemented these practices, leaders also spoke candidly about some of the barriers to DEI they experience, like limited applicant pools, geographically siloed demographics, board and leadership resistant to change. Recall from earlier that there's a positive relationship between an organization's willingness to discuss concepts of DEI and their ability to actually implement those practices. However, there is still a gap between the two, as illustrated by this quote by a nonprofit leader. With the board of directors, there is a desire to increase diversity, yet a lack of action or actionable steps that make effort to change. We need to rethink common approaches in order to truly make a systems change. This means deconstructing and disrupting processes we are familiar with, like hiring practices. What are organizations looking at when recruiting new candidates? How much is lived experience factored into candidates' qualifications? These are some of the things to consider when deconstructing and improving DEI practices.
So now we'll take a look at BIPOC leadership representation in nonprofits as compared to the county's BIPOC composition. So the horizontal dotted line shows that 56% of San Diego County's population identify as BIPOC. However, a far smaller percentage of nonprofit CEOs, board chairs, leadership teams, and board members identify as BIPOC. That said, we have taken a closer look at how the demographics of leadership have changed using a matched sample of 68 organizations for which we have the data for both 2021 and 2022. And what we found is that there have been small increases in BIPOC representation among nonprofit leadership. Most notably, there was a statistically significant increase in the percentage of BIPOC CEOs and board members between 2021 and 2022. The challenge then is closing this gap between the county average of BIPOC representation and nonprofit leadership to move toward a racial makeup more representative of San Diego County. So what can nonprofits do to move this needle on increasing BIPOC representation? Well, our leader surveys over the past 3 years give us a really important hint, and we're going to share that with you now. First, I'll start by saying that these graphs are a little bit hard to make sense of, but I'm going to walk you through them. But first, I'll just say overall, we found that organizations in which the CEO identified as BIPOC and organizations in which the board chair identified as BIPOC had more BIPOC representation on boards and leadership teams than organizations in which the CEO and or board chair identify as white. So let's break that down visually a little bit. In the chart on the left, you can see in organizations in which the CEO identified as BIPOC, 51% of the leadership team also identified as BIPOC. In contrast, and right below that, in organizations in which the CEO identified as white, only 35% of the leadership team identified as BIPOC. And in the chart on the right, you can see the same pattern with boards. In organizations where the board chair was BIPOC, the rest of the board had on average 30% more BIPOC members than when the board chair was white. In some additional analysis, we also found that intersectionality of leadership plays a role in BIPOC representation. And when I say intersectionality, I mean the overlap or intersections of multiple identities. For example, how identities like race and gender overlap and interact with each other. So when both the CEO and board chair identified as both BIPOC and female, the leadership team had on average 24% more BIPOC members, and the board had on average 38% more BIPOC members. And this is compared to when the CEO and board chair were not both BIPOC women. And in addition to tracking changes in DEI, as Nayeli mentioned, we also asked nonprofit leaders about how their organization is considering the effect climate change is having on their clients. And we found that while nonprofit leaders realize the effects that climate change has on seemingly unrelated aspects of life like mental health, cost of living, and food security, they reported that they just didn't currently have the capacity or knowledge to take action. And as you can see in the chart, only 16% of organizations reported they consider the effects of climate change a great deal, and nearly all of those organizations were environmental organizations. So this quote exemplifies what we heard from many respondents who were not working directly in the environment space. A leader from a hospital told us, "This discussion comes up in almost every meeting. The challenge is developing a format or a forum to impact change." So now we will move into examining the financial health and capacity of the nonprofit sector. As the chart on the left shows us, 77% of nonprofit leaders tell us that demand has increased for their programs and services, and 50% report having wait lists for their programs and services. However, only 15% of leaders report being able to meet all of that increased demand. So this indicates that there's still a gap between the needs of the community and nonprofit sector's ability to respond to those needs.
We also asked nonprofit leaders what the causes were for increased demand for services, and these are the primary themes that we heard. Changes in political climate, such as changes in women's rights and in immigration policy, COVID-19, increased basic needs as a result of inflation, and the high cost of living. As one community leader so vividly described, the continued rise in the cost of living with little to no wage growth, coupled with the economic disparities felt disproportionately by low-income populations due to COVID fallout, has led families to feeling the pinch far more now than they have before. People are struggling to survive and turning to agencies like ours and other nonprofits to access the social safety nets they need to get by.
So one way nonprofits meet community need is through collaboration and partnership. 85% of respondents reported participating in either a network, a coalition, or a collective impact initiative. And we asked respondents to what extent they believed collaborating improved outcomes for communities they served. And nearly all of them felt they did to at least some extent. And 56 believed they improve outcomes to a great extent. One nonprofit leader told us, "We also are seeing increased collaboration between nonprofits and between nonprofits, for-profits, corporations, and government. I think more effects are being made to cross those dividing lines to work towards common goals." That's really, really encouraging.
So we're now going to switch and talk about nonprofit workforce, which is probably the most challenged area of the sector currently. Before we get to that, here are some stats about nonprofit workforce in 2021. Of the 12,000 nonprofits, there are 2,916 that are staffed. There are 98,108 paid employees, contributing to $5.8 billion in total wages, and 10% of private employment is at a nonprofit, further evidence of the important role of the nonprofit sector plays in our local economy. There has been a lot of movement in and out of the workforce. Interestingly, with all of this movement, nonprofit leaders reported the biggest challenge lies in hiring more so than in retention. 2/3 of survey respondents reported it has been difficult to hire qualified employees, whereas 23% of respondents reported it was difficult to retain qualified employees. Not surprisingly, given the growing demand for services, nonprofits want to grow to meet increased community needs, but hiring challenges is making it very difficult. As you can see in the chart, most organizations predict a larger staff size in the next 12 months. Nearly all respondents, which is about 93%, reported hiring this year. But despite these hires, 62% had a vacancy at the time of the survey. Of those that had a vacancy, 74% reported it negatively impacted their ability to deliver services. Reading through the open-ended responses, what struck me the most was how many times there was a request for pay transparency, named as an issue of recruitment and retention. As a nonprofit leader shared with us, our hourly employees currently live with extended family in order to make ends meet. We are gradually raising the hourly rate and expanding benefits, but not fast enough to attract and retain the staff that we need.
Okay, so the pie chart on the left shows that mid-level positions are the most difficult to hire for right now. In terms of retention, it's most difficult to retain staff in entry-level positions. And then, as Nayeli explained, hiring is more challenging than retention right now. And this chart shows that the most difficult types of positions to fill are program and direct services, administration, operations and human resources, and fundraising and development. And we also collect data on job postings from npworks.org. And this data aligns very closely with what we heard in our nonprofit leader survey. The top 3 positions posted on NPWorks between April and July of this year were program staff, administration, operations and HR, and development and fundraising. The very same positions that respondents told us were most difficult to fill. And on the right, you can see the median salaries posted for each of those positions. Now, focusing specifically on retention, nonprofit leaders have responded to staff needs over the past year. And these proactive responses likely help to explain why retention was not perceived as a problem by most organizations. 83% of organizations reportedly increased their wages. 79% provided flexibility and remote work options, and about half also increased benefits. And as we know, paid staff are not the only ones bringing nonprofit missions to life. Volunteers are also very important for most organizations. In fact, nearly 3/4 of respondents reported that volunteers are either very important or essential to their operations. And in our quarterly poll of San Diegans, we asked about their volunteering behavior. And as you can see on this chart, and now as outlined by the dotted box, we found a slight decline in volunteering since the start of the pandemic. And of course, this is likely due to concerns over transmission of the virus while volunteering, as well as stay-at-home orders. So it's going to be really interesting to track whether this is a lasting trend or if people will resume their volunteering activities as they feel safer. So we've just painted this picture of a disrupted workforce, but I want to share good news with you as well. So the chart on the left shows that nonprofit leaders rated their financial health relatively strong. One indicator of financial health is how many months of cash on hand an organization has to pay their monthly expenses. And for the second year in a row now, organizations are reporting strong cash reserves. On average, respondents told us their organizations have 8 months of cash reserves, and historically, nonprofits have about 3 months or less. So this is a good position for organizations to be in. And interestingly, we analyzed if and how this strong financial health was related to whether an organization still had emergency relief funding left in their operating budget. And we found that it wasn't related. In fact, even organizations that did not report receiving emergency relief funding at all still had strong cash reserves. And as you might expect, a deeper look at financial health by organization size shows a different picture for some nonprofits. In the chart, you can see that current financial health declines, as does the size of the organizational budget. Now looking towards the future a little bit. In terms of fundraising outlook, the chart shows a comparison between 2021 and 2022. And though respondents were slightly more optimistic last year when it came to fundraising, a majority still said they expected it to be the same or better next year. And this positive outlook on fundraising carries over to the general positive predictions of financial health in the coming 12 months. You can see on the chart that most respondents also predicted either the same or stronger financial health in the coming year.
We've shared data with you on the point that points to a region in need, a nonprofit workforce stretched thin, yet a sector in decent financial health, ready to collaborate and confront our most pressing problems. So what kind of support does the sector want and need in order to be able to continue to serve our community? First, nonprofit leaders told us that they want their needs to be shared with funders and policymakers. The other areas for support most frequently mentioned were DI training, board development, and strategic planning. This marks the end of our data presentation. Thank you for your support, your attention. I would like to thank some people behind the scenes that aren't up here. Dr. Tinkler and Connolly that did magic with all the presentation. And then also invite Dr. Dietrich to come up and close us out with summary on thoughts. And then we'll take some questions from the audience.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Woo! What was it? You say data, I say party. Okay. I'll never forget that. That was amazing. Okay, so I really congratulate you both. Getting up here and doing that kind of work is not easy. What's coming next is also not easy because we're going to let you ask us some questions, and we'll all stay here for that. Some thoughts, some quick thoughts, and in the report we actually make some recommendations, and you probably have some pointed recommendations based on these findings as well. We kind of divide our recommendations up into sort of 3 categories, right? Recommendations for nonprofit leaders and board members. And so there's this interesting thing here right now with these reserves. Like, are we going to save all those reserves for a rainy day, or can we sort of take a little risk right now? And so I think our recommendation is risk, but risk that's involved in accelerating revenue, right? Because, everyone's probably wondering, why is there such a people are so confident about the future financially? Don't they know a recession is coming? And what, things are, but you know what? I think everyone is the sense I get from reading all the comments is people are willing to bet on themselves. If you look back over the data from the Great Recession, which was, so long ago, actually nonprofits continue to grow in revenue and assets throughout that whole time, kind of earning the name, the recession-proof sector in some way. So there's some data to show that, and I think nonprofit people are generally sort of positive and believe they're going to do the work no matter what. So I think there's some really interesting opportunities in the federal and state budget. And this idea about equity in nonprofit wages, this falls for me under the category of boards. So board members, you're the ones, right? If you want to make progress, and we'll hear from a group later today about how they've made progress on wages and wage increases in their organization with very limited resources. But the board has to kind of really put the plant the seed and make it the goal, whether you can do it this year or the year after. So that's really falling in kind of the laps of boards, I think. Advocating for investment in the nonprofit workforce. So if you're a funder and you're funding workforce development in any field, are you funding workforce development for nonprofits? Right? Because this workforce is vital to our economy and to the health and well-being of our sector. So we make some recommendations in that space. We make recommendations for donors and funders to increase donations and grant amounts to match the rate of inflation at least, or to understand and tell the story of the nonprofit sector. You see that's the number one thing nonprofits want us to do is tell their story, help close that disconnecting gap between what public thinks and what really is. We really need help with that, and make multi-year commitments, and donors make multi-year pledges is helpful. And then just show generally in our whole community for all of us, right? What can we do? Be an advocate, right? Advocate with, and this is what we're telling San Diegans. I'm not telling this to all of you because you already all do this, but this is what we're telling San Diegans. Be an advocate for the causes that you actually really are concerned about, right? And if you want to engage with a nonprofit, ask them how you can help, right? And then my last one that I threw in for fun was consider getting a job in the nonprofit sector because it's a great place to work. And so those things you'll see in our press releases and different things. This is kind of the calls to action that we came with today, and we are able to take some questions for about 7 or 8 minutes. So I'm going to ask my colleagues to join me, and you can grab some chairs, and we have some mics in the audience, and we are happy to answer questions.
Should we just?
Oh, Mr. Helshi, go ahead. Yes, Rick first, and just grab those chairs, you guys. You want to stand?
Yeah, we can stand.
We only have
Okay,
Thank you, Dr. Dietrich.
Sure.
And great presentation, by the way. Thank you very much. Wonderful information. Was there any point in what you learned that was like a surprise? Like, there were some surprises for me, but I'm interested to hear from the researchers. Oh, that wasn't expected.
Well, I'm going to actually introduce Dr. Tessa Tinkler, who is our director of research, who stepped backwards back in the background of presenting, but is definitely in the foreground of all this analysis. So I'm going to actually introduce Dr. Tessa Tinkler to you, and she can probably take a shot at that first question.
Yeah, I have one area that was surprising to me. It was actually the collaboration one, because we asked about about collaboration. We've asked about it for many years. And I think this is the first year where we see, first of all, almost every organization says they're collaborating. So I think that was something that was new. And that they think it has an impact. Sometimes you hear, oh, collaboration's so hard, we're not sure it really makes a difference, but in general, nonprofit leaders really feel like it is making an impact on the communities they serve.
Natalie, did you?
We mentioned this very briefly in the presentation, but in the responses to challenges for hiring staff and the recruitment, the amount of times that pay transparency was spoken about in the terms of requesting it in order to be able to offer competing and equitable salaries. That was surprising. In the years that we've analyzed, this is the first time that I've seen it mentioned so many times as a need in order to advance and be able to hire, not only hire, but also retain staff.
Tom?
Yeah, I'll just quickly flip that question and say something that is surprisingly unsurprising, and it's specifically the DEI data. It's like, you know, the relationship between being able to talk about things and actually being able to do things. It's not a surprising finding, but it is surprising that you can put those in numbers and put it out in the community. Like, look, these are the numbers that say that these are the practices that are going to improve your organizations and make them more equitable. So I think overall, like, there's a lot of things in the report that, yeah, while there's a relationship there that's not necessarily surprising, you can bring them to life in the community.
I think the big takeaways for me are the effects of inflation and the real challenges in the workforce. And then I told you this sort of disconnect, and I actually talked with our keynote speaker a little bit about this the other day, trying to make sense of why there's such a rosy outlook when you know, sort of we're hearing terrible things about the economy and different things. And I think I kind of came to some conclusions that I just mentioned to you about why maybe people are willing to bet on themselves right now in terms of our nonprofit sector. So thank you for that. Somebody else have a question? Yes. Ellie. I can't call on everybody by name, but a lot of you.
Thank you so much for the research. I enjoyed the narrative. I did wonder about the 8-month cash figures. That's creating a narrative that's not realistic. And also, CPAs that I've talked to that work with nonprofits nationally encourage between 3 to 6. So that's what we've been trying to stick to. So just want to make sure that we're not perpetuating a narrative that's not realistic. So maybe just talking to CPAs that work with nonprofits nationally is what I recommend. And then also, you know, just kind of, and I'm feeling like all these issues that are being talked about in terms of social inequities, environmental issues, lack of value that nonprofits have in this society is kind of all tied together. There is this common thread, right? And recently I encountered a funder, a person that is in the place of distributing resources that asked me, what's wrong with market-driven capitalism? And you know, I'm like, this is kind of the story behind that in my mind. So going back to your chart about disconnect between where resources are being invested and where communities are actually talking about where resources are being invested, I enjoy that chart and I see it every year, and I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity here for maybe USD to dive deeper into what our community is looking for in terms of investments and how this can be a tool for a more democratic, participatory resource mobilization in our community, because I see USD as really a source for this. Sorry, I'm getting a little nervous talking about this.
Well, did you want to come up here, Ellie? No. Well, you know, you always have such great observations. I want to clarify, and it's something I think we'll take back with us and continue to talk about, but I definitely want to clarify one thing about the 8 months. We're not recommending, that's what organizations reported. So, I mean, I'm not the financial advisor in here, so there's some in the room that you can tell the audience what you report, but it's just kind of a moment in time. We saw it last year too, and you know, it just gives us, you know, some ideas about maybe what do we want to do. Do we have a strategic advantage right now to think about how to deploy those reserves? So that's kind of where we're not recommending, you know, and then when you analyzed it, it didn't matter. I said, oh, okay, well, this is going to be for all large organizations. It did not matter by organizational size or by subsector. So people are just have a little, on average, a little bit more reserves right now. Somebody else, we have time for one more question and then we'll be here. Yes, anybody else? Yep, okay, sorry. We got one there and we'll ask both your questions and then we're gonna let everyone go to a break. So we'll do one and one. So ask the question and then ask the other question and then we'll answer both of them.
Hi, Ani Bracke, CEO of the San Diego Hunger Coalition. Hi. I'm wondering if next year you might also dive a little bit deeper into the grading of philanthropy. And one of the areas I often wonder about is applying the EDI lens to the people in the funding decisions. Those decision-making roles, I think, is another piece of the puzzle that we don't talk about very much.
Yeah, no, thank you. And a question? Last one, and then you guys get a break.
Good morning, my name is Nin with Alliance Healthcare Foundation, and my question is actually related to the previous one around the report card, where many of us laughed at, of like, we all got D's and F minus, whatever that means. Right?
Just report the data.
And so, as a foundation, I have the question of where is that coming from, right? Is that related to the data around the trust and, foundations or just funders having to be more intentional about building relationships and not transactions? Or I was just wondering if you had more of the story behind some of those grades that we got.
Well, it's important. I think you're all A students, okay? You all look like A students to me. So I think it's important to know what the question, the actual wording of the question is. How do you grade the leadership in these particular subsectors' ability to enact change in certain areas, in our community? So that I want to first lay that out. It's not like grading their performance as individual organizations, but moreover. So I think it's just and it's easy to say, like I said, if we put the nonprofit leaders up there, they put them at the top. You graded yourselves at the top for those of you that responded. So, it's easy to kind of just bang hard on other people. And I think the reason I debated whether I was going to show that slide or not, but I think it just invites us to think about what's everybody's role in this, in lifting up leadership. And we can't sit around and wait for everybody else to lead, right? I think I have one more is it a quick one? Yes.
Yeah.
And then we'll stay. And we're also happy to answer methodology questions or anything you ever want to ask us. You're more than welcome to. It's fine. Yep.
Good morning, folks. Matthew Gordon, Blue Heart Foundation. We send young black men to four-year universities. Phenomenal job on the data and the information, pretty much. I have about 50 pictures on my phone right now for all your slides, so thank you. But I kind of want to piggyback off of her question, because I specifically love that you tracked the scorecards. How much of this information is actually being shared with donors, funders, elected officials? Is USD playing a role in that?
Yes.
To let them know?
So what happens next, what you don't see is like, we're happy that you're all here today and you'll get, a copy of the report but then Dr. Young, who you're gonna meet, is our wonderful executive director of the Nonprofit Institute, and myself and other folks, we go on a pretty long road show after this. Mm-hmm. We have meetings with electeds we take that first bar really seriously, that you want us to tell this story, right? So we have a whole host of meetings coming up with all the folks that you mentioned. We have pieces, we have a large spread coming out in the Union Tribune, the San Diego Business Journal, that actually shows a lot of these data. So thank you. And if there's someplace you want us to go, or if you want us to come and talk to your organization, your coalition, your board, we're happy to do so. And we've done that with different groups, with SVP and different folks all over San Diego. So please just let us know. So now, your coffee is probably sitting in and you're ready for a refresh. So one thing I need you to do, though, is two things before we go. One, promise me you will come back. Okay?